sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Greetings, everyone. I hope you've been well since the last time we connected. So, the sutta that I'm going to read today is a very interesting one. It is compared to many of the suttas, it is very straightforward in terms of the complexity of terms that is used there. This is 61st sutta from the Middle Length Discourses in the Majjhima Nikaya. Ambalatthikarahulovada Sutta. This is the advice to Rahul at Ambalatthika. So Rahul is the Buddha's son, and this sutta was probably this interaction between the Buddha and Rahula probably happened when Rahula was still a fairly young person, based on how the Buddha has explained it very gently, as one would to a child, right? And in some ways, it is a continuation of what we discussed the last time we met, which was about the vigilance required for awakening, right? The need for continued vigilance. This is related to that in the sense that it talks about how we can reflect on the actions that we're about to perform, have performed, or are performing, and increase our understanding of our motivations and the understanding of what may result from the motivations that we have. Right? Okay, so I'll start reading. I'm using Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation today. Majjhima Nikaya 61, Ambalatthika Rahulovada Sutta, advice to Rahul at Ambalatthika. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagriha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel's sanctuary. Now, on that occasion, the Venerable Rahul was living at Ambalatthika. Then, when it was evening, the Blessed One rose from meditation and went to the Venerable Rahula at Ambalatthika. The Venerable Rahula saw the Blessed One coming in the distance and made a seat ready and set out water for washing the feet. The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready and washed his feet. The Venerable Rahul paid homage to him and sat down on one side. Then the Blessed One left a little water in the water vessel and asked the Venerable Rahul, Rahula, do you see this little water left in the water vessel? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so little, Rahul, is the spiritual path of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. There's a little water left in the vessel, and the Buddha tells Rahula, so little of the spiritual path is left in those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. Then the Blessed One threw away the little water that was left and asked the Venerable Rahula, Rahula, do you see that little water that was thrown away? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so, Rahul, those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie have thrown away their spiritual path. Then the Blessed One turned the water vessel upside down and asked the Venerable Rahul, Rahul, do you see this water vessel turned upside down? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so, Rahul, those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie have turned their spiritual path upside down. Then the Blessed One turned the water vessel right way up again and asked the Venerable Rahul, Rahul, do you see this hollow, empty water vessel? Yes, Venerable Sir. Even so hollow and empty, Rahul, is the spiritual path of those who are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie. It's a very interesting and way of demonstrating that the Buddha uses, and one may feel that he's extremely strong in his censorship of deliberate lying, right? But this is what the Buddha is trying to teach here, that craving or taking things personally, dividing any situation into one of personal gain. Right? Okay, what can I get from it? what outcome do I want? Coming from a base of craving, coming from a base of I like one thing, I don't like one thing. I like one outcome, I don't like one outcome. Coming from a compulsive way of thinking that way, not looking at what is appropriate, most suitable, or most beneficial to do in that situation. A lie, in fact, breaking any of the precepts, is typically an indication that one has taken a situation so personally that they are willing to do something that will create harm for oneself and harm for others affected by one, just for that short term outcome. So the Buddha says the vigilance required is one cannot, if we are able to rationalize that one lie was useful or it was the only option in a situation, then depending on the situation, so you have put a price to your precepts, you have put a price to doing the right thing. So depending on the situation, you have taught your mind that it is possible to rationalize your actions by saying that the situation demanded it, that the actions of other people demanded it, or that the personal need demanded it in that moment, right? So it is just a gateway, just like cigarettes are called gateway drugs, right? So they're gateway into more serious drugs. So a lie is a gateway drug into breaking all sorts of precepts because you've taught your mind the habit of rationalizing something that you are doing based on craving, based only for the short term myopic outcome that you want, because your mind is compulsively entangled with that situation. Suppose, Rahula, there were a royal tusker elephant with tusks as long as chariot poles, full grown in stature, high bred, and accustomed to battle. In battle, he would perform his task with his forefeet and his hind feet, with his forequarters and his hindquarters, with his head and his ears, with his tusks and his tail. Yet he would keep back his trunk. Then his rider would think, this royal tusker elephant performs his task in battle, yet he keeps back his trunk. He has not yet dedicated his life. But when the royal tusker elephant performs his task in battle, not just with his forefeet and hind feet and other body parts, but also with his trunk, then his rider would think, this royal tusker elephant with the tusks as long as chariot poles performs his task in battle with forefeet and hind feet and also with his trunk. He has completely dedicated his life. Now there is nothing this royal tusker elephant would not do. So too, Rahula, when one is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, there is no evil, I say, that one would not do. Therefore, Rahula, you should train thus. I will not utter a falsehood even as a joke. So here the Buddha is again saying that in the given the right circumstance and the right price on the situation, the elephant would say, okay, let me protect my trunk. Whoever is depending on me, whether it's my rider or my king, I will they can take care of themselves. Not I will make up an excuse. I will say I had to protect my trunk and I have given everything, I have dedicated everything, but it's just my trunk, right? So he has created a rationalization in his mind and he has accepted that it is okay to provide, as long as I have a rationalization, I can justify my actions and I can sleep soundly and feel comfortable with what I've done. It may appear so again in the short term, but with precepts, with life, anything that you do is teaching your mind. Why is this important? Right? Because your mind is always learning with every action. So if you teach your mind it is okay to do something in a particular situation, as long as I have a rationalization for it, as long as I can justify why I did it, then the mind learns that is the next time a situation comes and there is a convenient action that is unwholesome, I can perform it as long as I can provide the necessary justification and rationalization. And this is what we do with most of our life, right? We keep creating stories that say, instead of looking at suffering head on, understanding suffering head on, and treating it by adopting the right practices, we create rationalizations of why we could not do the right thing in a particular situation, why there was no other option, and why that suffering that ensues from those actions was unavoidable. I would like to repeat this line because I feel that it is something really deep to reflect on. So, to Rahula, when one is not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, there is no evil, I say, that one would not do. May seem like a very big exaggeration, but it is simply that the mind has, when one does that, the mind learns that for any action, as long as I can tell myself a story, nice story, which says I had no other option, I had to do this, I will be able to justify it. You may not come to a circumstance where you are breaking all of your precepts, but that is not internally driven. That is simply driven because the environment may be favorable for you not to have to break the precepts. But as soon as the environment changes, something that we don't have control over, your mind will be liable to use that same strategy, do something unwholesome as long as you can justify it later. What do you think, Rahula? What is the purpose of a mirror? The purpose of reflection, Venerable Sir. So too, Rahula, an action with the body should be done after repeated reflection. An action by speech should be done after repeated reflection. An action by mind should be done after repeated reflection. Rahul, when you wish to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I wish to do with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. It is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. It is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results. Then you may do such an action with the body. Also, Rahul, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I'm doing with my body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing. So the first part that we talked about is an action that you wish to do, that you're about to do, something in the future. Here we are talking about an action that is currently being performed, in the act of being performed. This action that I'm doing with the body leads to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. It is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you should suspend such a bodily action. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I'm doing with the body does not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. It is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results. Then you may continue in such a bodily action. Also, Rahul, after you have done an action, so now the action is in the past, with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Did the action that I did with my body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Was it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I did with the body led to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both. it was an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results, then you should confess such a bodily action, reveal it, and lay it open to the teacher or to your wise companions in the holy life. Having confessed it, revealed it, and laid it open, you should undertake restraint for the future. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I did with the body did not lead to my own affliction or to the affliction of others or to the affliction of both, it was a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, pleasant results. You can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. So I'll just take a pause here. So the Buddha talks about 3 points of reflection. When you're about to perform an action. So we will, this same categorization will be repeated for verbal actions as well as mental actions. So typically the Buddha categorizes actions in 3 ways: physical action, verbal action, and mental action. Right? And the same advice has been given for mental and verbal actions as well. And what is it? One is before performing an action. One thing to note here is the Buddha clearly says, if you know. There are often actions that we take, even with the most wholesome of intent, or sometimes with indifference, where we don't necessarily have a bad intent, but we are not paying too much attention. But what happens from that action may turn out to be something that is harmful. So this is related to the Buddha's talking about a deliberate act of lying, right? So if you are aware, it is possible that you are not aware. It is possible that when you walk, you end up trampling on ants, no matter how careful you are, right? It is possible that you may do something that may have bad consequences. You may also do something, you may go to help someone with a very good intention, but what you say may translate very differently for the other person and may actually lead to their affliction. That is something that we do not control. What happens when action has been released from us, within us, we do not control the complete chain of events that will follow. However, what we do control is understanding what the effect, to the extent possible, to the extent of our understanding, trying to understand what will be the effect and trying to understand the intention behind it. But how do you do this, right? So the Buddha talks about something before the action, the same thing while performing the action. Even while performing, at some point, you do realize that this is for my affliction or the affliction of others or the affliction of both. There is an opportunity to exit from that action. To engage in an argument, as soon as you do realize that what I'm doing is for my affliction, the affliction of others, and the affliction of both, one should not continue performing that action. Right? One should exit from that. Right? Finally, once we have performed the action, have a look at the intention that was underlying and the consequences that followed. If it was something that led to one's own affliction, affliction of others, affliction of both, so the Buddha understands that people will commit mistakes. Right? It's the initial part may sound very, very forbidding, very, very strict. That is the standard one should hold oneself to. But it will happen that in spite of the best attempts, there will be mistakes. So the Buddha also prescribes what to follow if a mistake has occurred. Should confess such an action, reveal it, lay it open to a teacher or wise companions in the holy life. And having done that, so not necessarily go and give it to someone who will be tempted to take advantage of that. Somebody that a spiritual friend, a companion who's following on the same path. Once you share something and make a determination to exercise restraint in the future, again, it is an act of training the mind. You are, instead of just assuming that the mind will be more careful in the future. If you have repeated a bad action, a bad pattern of actions, right? Unwholesome pattern of actions, your mind has already learned that. You may feel some guilt, but verbalizing it, acknowledging it, and determining to undertake restraint in the future teaches our mind that this action did have consequences. There was guilt, and there is cause for changing behavior in the future. So you are actively teaching your mind a lesson. And now comes the question: how do you do this? Right? Things are happening. How do you have the bandwidth to be able to process so much information, evaluate consequences, and modify your action all at the same time, performing actions, millions of actions every day? And this is where the understanding of the practice comes in. What one needs to build an awareness of, which is sammasati or samyak smriti or right mindfulness. So mindfulness is remembering to observe how your attention moves from one thing to another. How the attention moves involves understanding where it is right now, how it is engaged with its contents, what is vying for the attention, and how it moves to that which is vying for the attention. And if in this process you understand that there is craving, there is tension and tightness in your mind, there is that compulsive feeling that is coming. This will manifest as a tangible, as a almost physical tension and tightness that you learn to recognize as you practice the swim practice, right? As soon as you identify that there is craving, then you are likely to perform an action, very likely to perform an action that will lead to one's affliction, affliction of another, or affliction of both. You may perform an unwholesome action, or you may not perform an unwholesome action, but you may still end up teaching your mind the wrong lesson that one should act compulsively based on what one's craving is. So you might end up teaching your mind the lesson that it is okay to ignore the craving that has developed inside and to act on that basis. So learning to identify this through our practice, the sitting practice that we do helps us to identify any tension or tightness that builds in our mind. It is an indicator of craving. It is an indicator of taking things personally. It is an indicator of becoming completely entangled in that situation and only wanting a certain outcome that you are personally attached to and being ready to do anything to achieve that outcome. Okay. So we identify if there is craving that is underlying our decision making process in that instant, and we diffuse that craving by using the 6 R's. We recognize that our attention is engaged with a thought, a stimulus with the basis of craving. We release that. We do not continue fueling that with our attention. The more we fuel our attention with the basis of craving, we will find that it has become more and more personalized. We relax the tension and tightness in our mind, reduce the craving. We smile to start moving our mind towards a wholesome state. We bring our mind to a wholesome state, either sending good wishes to ourselves, to other people, that is, any of the Brahma Viharas. We bring our mind back to loving kindness or metta, to compassion or karuna, to joy or mudita, and equanimity or upekha. We bring our mind back to one of these states and then we act on what needs to be done. So it does not mean that we just completely ignore everything that is happening. That is one of the reasons why we practice the walking meditation. We are in the world performing actions. We are not isolated from actions. However, whatever actions we are taking, it is being taken from a wholesome base, a base of the Brahma Vihara. So that is the contrast between the actions that are being taken from a base of craving and actions that are being taken from a base of Brahma Viharas: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. These are bases that will, to the best of our knowledge, lead us to perform actions that will not lead to our own affliction. Loving kindness is directed to us as well as to others, will not lead to the affliction of the other or the affliction of both. Again, this is to the best of our knowledge. How things may eventually unfold, what are the chains of events that our action sets off, we may not be in complete control of that. But what we can be mindful of, we can be mindful of the state of mind in which we are performing that action. Is it because of taking something personally? Are we doing something because I like one thing and I don't like another thing? Or are we doing it with a mind filled with loving kindness, compassion, joy, or equanimity? That is where we need to continuously move our actions to. So, what we need to do instead of looking at the entire consequences of something, just look at your motivation. Look at what is driving your desire to perform an action. Is it craving? Is it inwardly directed? Is it directed towards not just inwardly, is it directed myopically? That what do I like or not like in this situation in this moment, even if it is something that may lead to my suffering in the future. I want that sweet, even though it is not good for my health. And performing that action that may lead me to have a sugar imbalance later in the day and lead me to have problems. So that was driven through the base of craving. However, if you are performing the same action from a base of either loving kindness, compassion, joy, or equanimity, you would understand that a thought of has come up that I want to eat the sweet or whatever the case may be. And that it is just a thought that has come up. I do not necessarily need to take action. I may let it be and I may bring my mind to a wholesome state. I may hear someone say something that is not flattering to me, and my immediate reaction might be to say something to hurt them in response. And this happens often in arguments. And after a while, the argument is not about emerging from that argument, having learned more and widened one's worldview. It is about winning that argument. It is about me versus you, right? And even then, if we realize that the reason that I'm about to say something is because of my craving, that I don't like what this person said, or I like to dominate and come out as a winner from this conversation. If that is the motivation, it is going to create affliction for yourself or for the others, either because of what you say or because of simply teaching your mind that it is okay to continue acting on the basis of craving. Instead, we can choose even during the action to exit. We understand, as soon as we understand that our mind is being driven by craving, by a very myopic, desperate, compulsive tendency and want to and attachment to an outcome in that situation. As soon as we understand that, we use the 6 R's. We we have recognized that our mind is attached with craving with a thought. We let that be, we release the craving in that thought. We let that thought be. We relax the tension and tightness in our mind. We smile and we come back to a wholesome state. The situation continues to persist. Now that our mind is in a wholesome state, we understand what is a wholesome action that I can take. And just like we did with physical action, bodily action, the Buddha continues with actions by speech and actions by mind. After having advised Rahula to have the same, exercise the same caution, same understanding, same reflection on verbal actions as well as mental actions, the Buddha continues. Rahul, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past purified their bodily action, their verbal action, and their mental action. All did so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will purify their bodily actions, their verbal action, and their mental action. All will do so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the present are purifying their bodily action, their verbal action, and their mental action. All are doing so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Therefore, Rahula, we should train this. We will purify our bodily action, our verbal action, and our mental action by repeatedly reflecting upon them. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Rahula was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Short and sweet sutta, very simple, very gently presented by the Buddha. And this is what we need. This is more important than any attainments, any experiences that you've had. How does your practice actually translate into your actions in life? Right? This is the most important thing. And my wish is for all of us to continue to use this kind of reflection to refine our actions at all times. So that was it. I would love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, anything to share related to your practice, related to the application of your practice in daily life.
I have a question, if you don't mind, because I've
Yes.
never heard, hello, I've never heard, so that was a first, that breaking of the 5 precepts is somehow always related to taking things personally. So that's in all the, so I'll have to reflect on that really and see it in action. But all of it would be taking, it actually all boils down to take that one thing, you've taken something personally, and so therefore you'll break a precept. I got that right, didn't I? That's what you were saying.
Absolutely. So anytime you break a precept, that's why the precepts are like a protection for you, right? So they are not a judgment. Nobody's there judging you. Your state of mind is the biggest indicator of what things are for you, right? Your state of mind, your happiness in every moment is what is important. So what's happening with the precepts, right? So why would one break the precept? Why would one harm or kill another living being intentionally? Why would one take what is not given? Why would one indulge in harsh speech, lies, gossip, and slander? Why would one involve in harmful sexual behavior? Why would one indulge in intoxication? It is because in that moment, craving underlies whatever situation is there and says, you collapse into that little situation. You become this little person who's caught in that situation. And the only thing you can think of is, I must lie to get out of this situation. Or I must take this thing that is not given to me because I like it. And maybe I deserve it because so many bad things have happened to me. Or because I can do more justice with it than somebody else can. We will create that story, right? So if we are breaking the precept, the reason that we do, and we deliberate, right? So you may end up doing something unintentionally. So precepts all have intentionality built into them. When you're doing it intentionally, when you understand it, that means you have decided that your short-term benefit in that situation. What is that short-term benefit, right? If I like something, I want it. If I don't like something, I want it to go away. I have a fly around me, I will swat it because I don't like it. In that moment, that is because I don't like it, because I will say that, okay, this fly could be poisoning me, right? Then maybe there is something more wholesome I can do. I can cover my food, or I can make sure my screens are all right, so flies don't come in, or I can wait for the fly to go away. It's not got a very long lifespan anyway, right? But instead, I may choose to kill it intentionally, right? And you justify that, okay, this was a disease threat, that's why I did it. So you justify that in your mind, and that is how you end up breaking the precept, because you have that craving, because you say, I want this. And in that moment, if once craving takes over, then nothing else is important in the world, right? So why do crimes of passion happen, right? Crimes of like red-blooded crimes, warm-blooded crimes, hot-blooded crimes, sorry. They happen because in that heat of the moment, whatever I like or I don't like is the most important. I didn't like the way you spoke to me, and I will punch you. Okay. or road rage, for example. All these things happen because what that little I that you have manufactured in that moment wants has become more important than anything else. And once it is important for I, then nothing else matters, right? So that is the primary thing you are in service of, and you end up breaking a precept, right? So, and the precept, like I said, is just a umbrella. Just repeating that makes you mindful of that craving that makes you do such thing, right? And that is essentially what we need to be mindful.
Do you think that works, though, specifically for the precept with regards to intoxicants? Not that I'm saying that that's not important, but my understanding, particularly of that precept, is that the main reason to stay away from intoxicants, because there was always the four precepts, is that it really gets in the way and can lead you down a path to break precepts much easier.
Absolutely, absolutely. It dulls your mindfulness, right? And
Yeah.
see, it's not just a particular action that you take, right? So even eventually, as you start working on purifying your mind, right? The thoughts that you think, right? So it may not be apparent to anyone else, right? It may just be apparent to you. The thoughts that you think also are training your mind in certain patterns, certain ways of being, certain ways of thinking, right? And it's just that. So once so intoxicants essentially reduce affect your judgment, right? Affect your understanding of craving. And in that situation, you will end up teaching your mind lessons, right? So the more unwholesome things, unwholesome patterns of action that you expose your mind to, the harder it is to teach wholesome action, right? So if you are, yeah, I mean, if you are training for a triathlon and you're stuffing junk food inside of yourself, you're kind of getting in your own way, right? So it's the same thing with the other precepts as well, right? So you are essentially putting in junk food and claiming to be training for a triathlon.
Thank you for the response. Thank you.
I have a question, Rajiv, that's
Yes.
unrelated to tonight's sutta. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I share a shortened, brief version of the 6 R's with my music students because they're non-Buddhist, and giving them 6 steps is a bit much for kids. So for the past 2 years or so, so what I use it for is actually like a brain exercise. I share it with them that way, but it's mainly for their learning development in music, but I also tell them that they can use it as a behavior development for other things or learning development for difficult subjects. So one of my students yesterday shared with me that it works for her and she's been sharing it with her friends. And I asked her, do you notice that, let's say previously when you got angry, it took you a longer time to like realize that you got angry before you stopped versus now? And she said, yes. But then I don't know, I was too quick in replying her by saying that, well, it's important to know that the problem is not being angry or anger arising, but staying angry for But now when I'm thinking back, I don't know if I gave the right answer or not. So I'm just asking to double check. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you, May. That was a very interesting point. So I think we can connect it with this sutta also, right? So the Buddha says, if you know, right? So it is a matter of mindfulness. So something may happen and we may temporarily get engaged in it. The point is, once we are aware of it, right, we need to use right effort. So that is the same instruction as for the meditation, right? Once you recognize, you follow through with the rest of the steps. If you do not recognize, you do not blame yourself for it, you do not castigate yourself for it. Instead, every time you recognize, you are exercising that muscle. It's a victory every time you recognize. So the fact that you slipped into an unwholesome behavior without understanding it, because that's a it's where you are in your path, right? So you cannot change that. You cannot wish that to be different. You can only work towards moving forward. So as soon as you understand that, you use right effort. So the Buddha says, if you know that this is going to lead to my affliction and the affliction of others and the affliction of both, then you step out of it. So I think that is perfectly fine. So making the mistake is not so important. Here again, he also talks about sharing it with companions in the holy life, that if you have realized later on, maybe not at the time that you were performing that action, but once you have performed that action, you realize that it was not leading to beneficial consequences for yourself or for others, then share it and make note of it so that you can practice restraint in the future. And so I think that is perfectly fine. And the other thing that is important here is especially the fact that we use the Brahma Viharas as the object of meditation, right? So that really helps with mindfulness, because it creates a direct contrast between craving, right? So when our intention, when our purpose is directed towards externally, towards the well-being of others, right? So in terms of a mind state, there is a very sharp contrast with when we become collapsed in that little personality that wants to do something. It's like a child throwing a tantrum. So when we go from somebody that is being generous to a child throwing a tantrum, that I like it, I want this outcome, I don't like it, I want this thing to go away. So we see that contrast. So that helps with the object of meditation of Brahma Vihara, specifically helps with the mindfulness as well, the ability to detect it. And as we keep refining our minds, we keep getting better at detecting it earlier and earlier. So it is just continuing to practice that muscle and teaching our mind the right lesson without ever being judgmental. Right? We have years and years, and if you believe in, so if you, I mean, it could be millions of years if you know believe in rebirth. So we have those many years of bad habits ingrained in us, so many moments of habits of taking things personally, looking at that myopic short-term outcome. We have that. So when things happen, it is to be forgiven and just reinforce the right pattern of action that we want to move towards. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So for the kids,
Absolutely.
if I use the term loving kindness, it's very vague. So what I tell them to do is think of like an event or something that happened that makes them feel happy, or like they have that kind of a warm and fuzzy kind of feeling around the heart area. And also I kind of emphasize that it's not the thought that's important, but it's the feeling that's generated by the thought that's important. So I'm just checking if that's the effective way to describe it to kids. So my students are anywhere from 6 to 14.
Right. So one thing I've tried, and again, I think this can be improved upon, is to say that suppose you have an infinite supply of ice cream that can be eaten right now, and you have for yourself, and you get to share it with your friend, right? So you feel happy about getting that ice cream, and you are look at that feeling and share that feeling with your friend. So just like you would do that, so how happy you'd feel, you're sharing that feeling as well as the ice cream with your best friend, right? So I think that is a different I mean, I think the idea of generosity is very important, right? And it's about connecting with kids, how you feel good about generosity, right? So I think sharing that goodwill, so eventually that's how we practice as well. We fill up our belly with loving kindness, and then we share it with our friends, right? So yeah, I think what you described works perfectly. And if you come up with any better ideas, just let me know as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll try the ice cream simile next time.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? If not, maybe we can end the session. Sharing of merits, I guess.
Yes, I think we can do that. I'll wait for a minute. Can even ask questions? We think we can take one last question. I'll just open up the prayer. So those who are, yeah. Okay, let's share some merit. May suffering once be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Nagas of mighty power, share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week ahead, and we will meet soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.